Dexter doesn't allow himself to feel hate. Hate is messy. Hate is reckless. And most of all, hate is dangerous. But 5 people pushed him past his limits. 5 people who made him lose control. Was it the monster who took everything from him? The killer who forced him to break his own rules? Or was the person Dexter hated most himself? By the end of this video, you'll have your answer. Kurt Caldwell takes the 5th spot on this list, and for good reason. On the surface, he was nothing more than a friendly businessman in Iron Lake. He helped people, played the role of a good guy, and earned the trust of the community. But behind that mask, Kurt was a predator, one Dexter recognized instantly. Kurt didn't just kill, he hunted. His victims were always young women, alone, vulnerable, with nowhere to go. He lured them in with kindness, made them believe they were safe, only to execute them in cold blood. And then, he did something even more disturbing. He kept them, preserved their bodies like trophies, freezing them in time so they would never decay. This wasn't just about murder, it was about control. But here's the thing. Dexter had dealt with killers like this before. Stopping men like Kurt wasn't personal, it was necessary. What changed everything was Harrison. Because Kurt didn't just kill, he went after Dexter's son. Kurt knew Dexter had killed his son, Matt, and he wanted revenge. But instead of going after Dexter directly, he took a different route, one that was far more twisted. First, he wanted to turn Harrison against his own father. He wanted to fill his head with doubt, make him question everything about Dexter, and push him to hate the one person who was supposed to protect him. And then, as the final act of revenge, he planned to kill Harrison, not just to hurt Dexter, but to make him suffer in the worst way possible, by making his own son hate him first, leaving him completely broken before taking him away forever. And the terrifying part? It almost worked. Kurt saw what Dexter didn't. He saw how lost Harrison was, how angry, how desperate he was for someone to understand him. And Kurt played his part perfectly. He made Harrison feel seen. He gave him the approval Dexter never could. For a moment, Harrison believed him. That's why Dexter hated Kurt. Not just because of the murders, not because of the twisted rituals, but because Kurt got to Harrison before Dexter could. He saw the cracks, he exploited them, and he nearly turned Dexter's own son against him. So when Dexter finally confronted Kurt, it wasn't about justice. It wasn't about the code. It was personal. This was rage. This was fear. This was a father reclaiming his son. But here's the cruel irony. Killing Kurt didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the doubts already planted in Harrison's mind. It didn't undo the damage. If anything, it only confirmed Harrison's worst fear. That his father wasn't a hero. That Dexter wasn't some misunderstood protector. That maybe Kurt had been right. If there's one thing Dexter truly despises, it's killers who refuse to take responsibility for their actions. And that's exactly what Travis Marshall was. The Doomsday Killer. A man who hid behind religious delusions, blaming his murders on divine prophecy instead of his own sick desires. But what made Dexter hate Travis wasn't just his crimes. It was what he forced Dexter to realize about himself. Dexter tells himself he's in control, that the code makes him different. But when he looks at Travis, he sees a man telling himself the exact same lies. Travis hides behind God. Dexter hides behind the code. Both believe their actions serve a higher purpose. Both think their victims deserve what happens to them. The more Dexter watches Travis, the more he starts to see the cracks in his own reflection. And then, Travis crosses the line. He kidnaps Harrison, not just a random victim, not just a symbol, but Dexter's son, the one innocent person Dexter has ever truly cared about. And in that moment, something inside Dexter snaps. He finds Travis in his church, ready to perform his final, sickening sacrifice. And this time, Dexter doesn't hesitate. He doesn't follow the code. He doesn't pretend this is about justice. It's personal. He drives the knife into Travis's chest. Not methodically, not with careful planning, but with rage. Pure, unfiltered, unstoppable rage. And the terrifying part? He enjoys it, watching Travis's life slip away, seeing the fear in his eyes, feeling the power. For the first time, Dexter isn't a controlled predator. He isn't a righteous hunter. He's just a man giving in to his darkest instincts. And for a fleeting moment, it feels good. But then, Deborah walks in, and everything collapses. Because this was never supposed to happen. No one was ever supposed to see him like this. But now, Deborah sees everything. Not her brother protecting the innocent, not justice. Just a man covered in blood, standing over a fresh corpse with a knife in his hand. And that's when Dexter realizes, Travis didn't just make him angry. He made him see the truth. He's not the exception. He's not a necessary evil. He's just another killer. Arthur Mitchell was the only serial killer who ever truly beat Dexter. He didn't just kill. He dismantled Dexter's entire life piece by piece, and the worst part, Dexter never even saw it coming. From the moment they crossed paths, Arthur wasn't just another target. He was an enigma, a serial killer with a perfectly constructed double life. A facade so convincing that even Dexter, the master of deception, believed it. At first, he was fascinated. The Trinity Killer was everything Dexter aspired to be. A man who had found the impossible balance between the darkness of his urges and the warmth of a seemingly normal, loving family. But that illusion didn't just crack, it shattered. Arthur wasn't just a killer, he was a monster. A man so consumed by his past that even Dexter, who built his life around justifying murder, struggled to comprehend it. The Trinity killings weren't random acts of violence. They were rituals, each one a recreation of the trauma that shaped him. At the core of his killings was his signature act, murdering women in bathtubs. Every victim was carefully chosen, every crime meticulously staged. He would place them in the water, slit their femoral artery, and watch as they bled out, just like his mother did in front of him when he was a child. Arthur didn't kill out of necessity or rage. He was repeating history, forcing his victims to experience the same pain that defined his existence. Arthur wasn't a man seeking control. He was a man trapped in an endless cycle of suffering, unable to escape the past. And that made him one of the most terrifying killers Dexter had ever faced. And yet, despite the horror of it all, Dexter still saw something in Arthur that fascinated him. Something that kept him close when he should have run the other way. Because Arthur Mitchell looked like the perfect version of what Dexter thought he could be. A family man, a husband, a father, a survivor. Dexter believed he could study him, learn from him, maybe even replicate the delicate balance Arthur had seemingly mastered. But what he failed to realize, what he was too arrogant to see, was that Arthur was never in control? Not really. He was just another slave to his urges, another monster trying to pass as human. And Dexter? He wasn't the hunter in this scenario. He was the prey. Because while Dexter was watching Arthur, studying him, trying to figure out how a man like this could keep his family intact, Arthur was watching him too. And in one final, devastating act of cruelty, Arthur did the one thing Dexter never saw coming. He murdered Rita. That wasn't just a loss. That wasn't just another kill. That was punishment, a deliberate, calculated attack designed to hurt Dexter in the one way he wasn't prepared for. Rita wasn't part of the code. She wasn't someone Dexter ever thought he would have to protect. And yet, in an instant, she was gone. Not because Dexter was reckless, not because he got sloppy, but because Arthur wanted him to suffer. And in that moment, for the first time in his life, Dexter felt something foreign, something he didn't know how to process. Not just anger, not just grief, hate, pure, burning, endless hate. Because Arthur Mitchell wasn't just another name on his table. He was the only person who had ever made Dexter truly lose. He took everything from him. His illusion of control, his belief that he could keep his two lives separate, his dream of a normal future. Arthur destroyed it all, and the most terrifying part? He didn't even do it out of necessity. He did it because he could. Arthur Mitchell wasn't just a killer Dexter wanted to stop. He was the only one Dexter ever truly wanted to make suffer. And yet, Arthur wasn't Dexter's final kill. That was reserved for someone else. Someone who forced Dexter to break the very code that had defined his existence. Because while Arthur may have been the man who shattered Dexter's illusion of control, there was another killer who pushed him even further. Someone who made him realize that deep down, the rules he lived by meant nothing. And that man was Oliver Saxon. Saxon wasn't like the others. He had no twisted philosophy like Arthur Mitchell, no obsessive rituals like Trinity, no tragic past to justify his crimes. He was just empty, a man who killed for no reason other than the thrill of watching life fade away. Dexter had faced countless monsters before, but Saxon did something no one else had. He didn't just take lives, he took away Dexter's purpose. He shattered the illusion that the code made Dexter different, that he was in control, that he was better. And the worst part? He made it personal. Saxon took Dr. Evelyn Vogel, the only person who ever truly understood Dexter, the woman who helped create Harry's code, the only one who never feared him, never judged him, and for a brief moment, made him believe he wasn't alone. But she wasn't just anyone. She was Saxon's own mother, and he took her life. It wasn't just a kill, it was a message, a brutal reminder that Dexter was truly alone. Then there was Deborah, not just his sister, but the person who loved him the most. She protected him, fought for him, and even covered for him when she knew it was wrong. And what did she get in return? A slow, agonizing death. Saxon didn't kill her outright, but he might as well have. She had him at gunpoint. She should have won. But in a split second, he turned the situation, shot her, and left her bleeding. The wound wasn't fatal. She made it to the hospital. She was recovering. Until the stroke. A sudden, irreversible consequence of Dexter's choices. If Dexter had never hunted Saxon, never pulled Deborah into his world, she would still be alive. And then came the moment Dexter truly broke his code. No plastic wrap, no trophies, no justifications. He walked into Saxon's holding cell, sat down, and let him attack first. He wanted it on camera. He wanted it to look clean. And the second Saxon moved, Dexter drove a pen straight into his neck. No code, no justice, just cold, quiet execution. A kill that wasn't about stopping a monster. It was about ending the one thing Dexter had spent his entire life clinging to. Because when you strip everything away, Dexter was never different. He was just another killer. No one caused more pain, more suffering, or more destruction in Dexter's life than Dexter himself. His self-hatred started on November 3rd, 1973, the day he watched his mother, Laura Moser, get murdered in front of him. At just 3 years old, he sat in her blood for 2 days until Harry Morgan found him. From that moment on, Dexter was never going to be normal. Harry saw the darkness growing inside him. Instead of healing it, he gave it a purpose. The code wasn't about making Dexter better. It was about controlling him. And Dexter believed it, using it as a shield, pretending he was different from the men he hunted. But the truth? He wasn't. Every person he loved suffered because of him. Rita was murdered because Dexter was arrogant enough to believe he could be a husband, a father, and a killer at the same time. Deborah, who loved him unconditionally, lost her career, her sanity, and eventually her life because of him. And Harrison, the son he tried to leave behind, was already becoming him by the time Dexter returned. It wasn't Kurt Caldwell, it wasn't Travis Marshall, it wasn't Arthur Mitchell or Oliver Saxon. Dexter was the real monster, and for the first time, he didn't run. He didn't hide. He faced the truth. So when Harrison pulled the trigger, Dexter didn't resist, because for the first time, he knew he deserved it. But did Dexter really die that night in Iron Lake? Or is there a chance he survived? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.